My son slid the brochure across my own kitchen table, glossy photos of a place called Willow Gardens Senior Living, and said, "Mom, we've already spoken to them. You move in on the 1st. Not, "Would you like to?" Not, "Let's talk about it." You move in on the 1st. I looked at the brochure. Then I looked at my son, 47 years old, sitting in the chair his father died in, wearing a golf shirt I probably paid for somewhere down the line, and I did something that clearly unsettled him more than tears or shouting ever could. I smiled. "Well," I said, "you've been busy, Dennis." You should know 2 things about me before we go on. First, I spent 26 years in the Army Nurse Corps, 2 wars worth of triage. You learn to tell the difference between a wound and a performance, between a man in pain and a man rehearsing pain. My son had been performing concern for 3 months, and I had been charting it, the sudden visits, the questions about my episodes, the way his wife Brianna photographed my refrigerator like it was a crime scene. Second, 11 months before that brochure hit my kitchen table, I had done something Dennis knew nothing about, something quiet, something with paperwork. I did it because of a phone call I was never supposed to hear. But let's take this in order, the way I'd give report at shift change. My husband, Frank, died 2 years ago and left me this house, 4 bedrooms on 6 acres, the maple he planted the year Dennis was born, the porch where we drank 40 years of coffee. The land backs onto the new highway spur, and 18 months ago the county rezoned the whole corridor. I know what my 6 acres are worth now, believe me. My son knows better. The visits started right after the rezoning notice came in the mail. Coincidence, you'll say. I'm 71. I don't have time left for coincidences that size. First, it was small. Dennis, noticing I'd repeated a story. Brianna, worrying that the stairs were getting hard for me. I do those stairs with laundry baskets, sweetheart. Then it escalated with a smoothness that told me it had a script. Dennis took me to a doctor I'd never heard of, just a checkup, Mom, where the questions were all about memory and the forms had checkboxes about daily functioning. Brianna started answering questions on my behalf in front of me. She gets confused in the evening. I have never once been confused in the evening. Irritated, yes, frequently, usually by Brianna. And then came the night of the phone call. It was a Tuesday last spring. Dennis and Brianna were over for dinner, and Dennis stepped out to the porch to take a call, and he made the mistake every son makes. He forgot that his mother's hearing aids work beautifully, and that the porch window was open, and that I was drying dishes 4 feet from it. "No, the appraisal came in higher," my son said to someone. 2.3, maybe 2.5 if the corridor deal closes. No, she won't sell, that's the whole problem. She's sentimental about it. That's why we're doing it this way. Guardianship petition. Doc Pearson's notes are already on file. 2 more visits and we'll have a pattern documented. Once I'm conservator, the sale doesn't need her signature. It needs mine. I stood at my sink with a dish towel in my hands and listened to my only child price my life like an estate auction. "The home?" my son laughed, low. "Willow Gardens takes my Medicare plus a supplement, costs us almost nothing. She'll be fine. Ma's tough." A pause. "Look, it's not cruel, it's practical. She's sitting on $2.5 million and using it to grow tomatoes." She's sitting on $2.5 million and using it to grow tomatoes. I finished drying the dishes. I want you to understand that. I dried every dish, and I put them away in the cupboards Frank built, and I went back out to the table and served my son pie. Because here's what 26 years of triage teaches you that nothing else can. When the bleeding starts, you don't scream. Screaming is for people who don't know what to do. I knew exactly what to do. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Herb Nakamura, attorney at law, who had handled Frank's affairs for 30 years, and whose son I had once talked through a very bad night at the VA where I volunteered. The second call was to my granddaughter, Maya, Dennis's own daughter, 22 years old, second-year nursing student, the only member of my bloodline who calls me just to talk, and the only one who had noticed, months before I said a word, that something was off. "Grandma," she said, at Easter, quiet, in the kitchen, "why does Dad keep asking me if you seem confused? You're the sharpest person in this family." Gray eyes. Mine. She sees what I see. "Maya," I said into the phone that morning, "how would you like to have lunch with your grandmother and a lawyer?" Lunch with Herb Nakamura took place in his office above the old savings bank with sandwiches Maya picked up and a legal pad that changed my life. I told him everything. The porch call, Doc Pearson's checkbox visits, Willow Gardens, the 2.3 million reasons my son had discovered a sudden concern for my well-being. Herb listened the way good lawyers and good nurses listen. No interruptions, no theater, one raised eyebrow at, "The sale doesn't need her signature, it needs mine." Then he set down his pen. "Ruth, what your son is describing is a guardianship petition. He'd ask a court to declare you incapacitated and appoint him conservator of your estate. It's a real mechanism, it exists, to protect people, and in the wrong hands it's the cleanest robbery ever invented, because the thief gets a judge's signature instead of a crowbar." He looked at me over his glasses. "But it has one weakness. It only works on someone who owns something." Maya frowned. "Grandma owns everything, that's the problem." "That," Herb said, "is fixable." What we built over the next 6 weeks, quietly, methodically, with the shades drawn on Herb's office windows, was this. First, a full neuropsychological evaluation arranged by me at the University Medical Center, not Doc Pearson's checkbox clinic. 4 hours of testing with a board-certified geriatric neuropsychologist. I scored, and I'm going to allow myself this one moment of vanity, in the 94th percentile for my age group. "Ma'am," the young doctor said, "your working memory beats half my residents." "Get it in writing," I told him, "every page." He did. Herb put it in the file with the dates stamped large. Establish your baseline before they establish their story. Triage Rule 1. Chart everything, chart it first. Second, the trust, an irrevocable trust drawn by Herb, executed with 2 witnesses and a notary, and my university evaluation stapled to the file, proving beyond argument that I knew exactly what I was signing. The house, the 6 acres, the accounts Frank left, all of it went in. Trustee, Herb Nakamura. Beneficiary, and Herb made me say it out loud 3 times to be sure, Maya Calloway, my granddaughter, skipping my son entirely. "You understand," Herb said gently, "once this is done, it's done. Irrevocable means irrevocable. You'll live in the house under a lifetime right of occupancy. Nobody can ever remove you, but you will no longer own it. Ruth Calloway will be, on paper, a woman of very modest means. A woman with nothing worth conserving," I said. Herb smiled for the first time that day. A guardianship petition over a tomato garden. I'd pay to watch him file it. Maya cried when she understood. Not about the money, she's not built that way, which is precisely why it's going to her. She cried because of what it meant about her father, and I held her in Herb's office and told her the thing I need you to hear too. "Sweetheart, we are not doing this to punish your dad. We're doing it because you can't guard a henhouse by negotiating with the fox. You move the hens." Third, and this was Maya's idea, and it's why I say she has my eyes, documentation of the other side. "Grandma, if Dad's building a fake record of you declining, we should build a real record of you-ing." So we did. Every week, video on her phone, me doing the Sunday crossword in pen, time-stamped, me reciting my medication list, doses, and interactions, like the nurse I am, me climbing the stairs with a laundry basket, narrating tartly for the camera, me at the VA on Thursdays where I still volunteer, with the coordinator happy to confirm my hours. 11 months of evidence filed and dated, sitting in Herb's office like ammunition in a locker. So, now you understand what I knew and what my son did not know on the afternoon he slid that glossy brochure across my kitchen table and said, "You move in on the 1st. He thought he was cornering a confused old widow sitting on $2.5 million. He was actually standing in front of a 26-year Army nurse with a 94th percentile memory, a bulletproof paper trail, an attorney on speed dial, and a net worth on paper of 1 Buick and a vegetable garden. Which brings us back to the kitchen, to the brochure, to my smile. "You've been busy, Dennis," I said. "Mom, don't make this a fight. It's already arranged. Brianna and I have power of... We've spoken to people. It's happening." "Power of what, dear?" I asked pleasantly. "Finish the sentence." His jaw worked. Brianna, by the counter, held up her phone, actually held it up, filming, the way she'd been documenting my refrigerator for months. "Dennis, look how agitated she's getting." I was pouring coffee, steady as an IV drip. "Mom," Dennis leaned forward, and he used the voice, the soft, reasonable, talking to the dying voice, and God forgive me, my own son was not good at it. "The house is too much for you, everyone can see it. Next week we're meeting with Judge Helverson about making things official. It'll be easier for everybody if you've already settled in at Willow Gardens by then. It shows cooperation." "Official," I repeated. "Guardianship, Mom, for your protection." And I looked at my son, and I confess there was a splinter of grief in it, the last one, the one you feel when you finally stop hoping, and I said the sentence I had been saving for 11 months. "Dennis, before you meet any judges, you should probably call a realtor and ask them to run the title on this house."
My son blinked at me the way he used to blink at algebra. "What are you talking about?" "The title, dear. The deed. Who owns this house?" I set his coffee in front of him. Cream, 1 sugar, the way I've made it for 40 years. "You've had it appraised twice. 2.3, wasn't it? Maybe 2.5 if the corridor deal closes." I watched the color leave his face by degrees, like a sunset in reverse. But in all that appraising, it seems nobody ever pulled the title. "Mom," Brianna lowered her phone, first smart thing she'd done all year. "What did you do?" "I grew tomatoes," I said. "Apparently that's all I do." Dennis was already scrabbling at his phone, and I'll give my son this, he has fast thumbs. Whoever he called, the county records office or that realtor he golfs with, it took under 4 minutes for his whole afternoon to come apart. I drank my coffee and watched it happen, and I am not ashamed to tell you it tasted wonderful. "A trust?" His voice had gone strange. The house is in a trust. Since last June?" He looked up. "Last June? That's 11 months ago. Yes." "You can't, Mom, you can't just..." He stood up so fast the chair barked against the floor Frank laid. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the confusion. Some scam artist got to you. Some lawyer talked a confused old woman into signing away..." "Sit down, Dennis." I did not raise my voice. 26 years of night shifts teaches you a register that goes under shouting, not over it. The tone you use on a combative patient at 3 a.m., the one that reaches straight past the panic to the animal that still takes orders. My son sat down. 47 years old, and his body remembered. "You're going to want to listen to the rest," I said, "because it concerns your meeting with Judge Halverson. The trust was drawn by Herb Nakamura, whom you've known since you were 9, so let's skip the scam artist theory. It's irrevocable. It was executed with 2 witnesses, a notary, and, this is the part I need you to hear, sweetheart, a 4-hour neuropsychological evaluation from the University Medical Center, dated 3 days before I signed, placing my cognition in the 94th percentile. It's stapled to the trust documents. Herb calls it the armor plating." Brianna made a small sound, like a kettle starting. "So, here is your legal situation, son, as I understand it, and Herb will confirm it Monday. He's expecting your call. You may certainly still file your guardianship petition. You may march Doc Pearson's checkbox notes into Judge Halverson's courtroom and argue that your mother is incapacitated. And the first thing the court will examine is the estate you're asking to conserve." I spread my hands at my kitchen. 1 Buick, a teacher's pension survivor benefit, a vegetable garden. The house belongs to the trust. The accounts belong to the trust. There is nothing left in Ruth Calloway's name worth the filing fee. "The trust can be challenged," Dennis said hoarsely, "if you were already declining when you signed. 94th percentile, Dennis, in writing from the university." I leaned forward. "And here's what happens the moment you challenge it. Herb enters my evaluation. Then he enters 11 months of dated video, me doing crosswords in ink, me reciting drug interactions, me hauling laundry upstairs you told a doctor I couldn't climb. Then, Dennis, he subpoenas Doc Pearson's file and asks the good doctor under oath how many of those memory episodes in his notes he personally witnessed, and how many were reported to him by you. And then, Dennis, then he plays the recording." The kitchen went very quiet. "What recording?" my son said. "Now, I want to be honest with you, the way I've been honest through this whole story. There was no recording of the porch call. I'd stood at that sink with wet hands and a dish towel. The only place that recording was in my 94th percentile memory. But my son didn't know that. And a lifetime of triage teaches you one more thing, the thing they don't put in the manuals. Sometimes the most important vital sign in the room is the look on a man's face when he's trying to remember exactly what he said out loud. The appraisal came in higher. 2.3, maybe 2.5 if the corridor deal closes. She won't sell, that's the whole problem. She's sentimental. I paused. Once I'm conservator, the sale doesn't need her signature, it needs mine. Dennis's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "She's sitting on $2.5 million, I finished gently, and using it to grow tomatoes. My son put his head in his hands at my kitchen table, and his wife stood frozen by the counter with her phone hanging dead in her fingers, its little camera pointed to the floor. "So," I said, and I stood and gathered the cups. "Shall I still expect you both for Sunday dinner? I'm making pot roast. And Dennis, I let myself have this one, I'd earned it. Bring the brochure. Willow Gardens looks lovely. Perhaps I'll keep it on file." He looked up at me then, and for one raw second I saw it. Not anger, fear. And underneath the fear, the question he couldn't ask. He should have asked it. Because what I'd done with the trust was not the whole of what I'd done. There was one more paper in Herb's locked drawer, and Sunday dinner was exactly where it was going to surface.
Sunday came, and with it my son and his wife, subdued as parolees bearing a store-bought pie I had no intention of eating. Maya came too. I'd asked her to. And at 4 o'clock, before the pot roast, the doorbell rang, and there stood Herb Nakamura, in his bow tie with his briefcase, exactly as arranged. Dennis's face when Herb walked into the dining room was a portrait I wish I could hang. "This is a family dinner," he managed. "That's precisely why he's here," I said. "Sit down, everyone. Nobody eats until the paperwork's done. Old triage rule. Treat the wound before you feed the patient." Herb sat at the head of the table, Frank's old chair, and opened his briefcase, and I watched my son brace for the killing blow, the lawsuit, the injunction, whatever punishment he'd spent 4 sleepless nights imagining. Herb took out one thin document and slid it across to Dennis. "Your mother," Herb said, "asked me to draft this 11 months ago, the same week as the trust. She asked me to hold it until, in her words, Dennis shows me who he's decided to be." He folded his hands. "This week, she called and asked me to bring it to dinner." Dennis stared at the paper like it might be armed. "What is it?" "Read it," I said. He read it. I watched his eyes move, stop, go back, move again, the same broken rhythm as a man rereading a diagnosis. "This is," his voice cracked, "Mom, this is a college trust. For your kids?" "For your children, yes. Maya's nursing school, paid through her doctorate if she wants one. Tyler's college fund, fully endowed, held until he's 25. I nodded at the paper. "Read the funding clause, where the money comes from." He read it, and his face did something I had not seen since he was a boy. It opened. "It's funded by the sale of the East 4 acres upon completion of the corridor deal, executed at the trustee's discretion." He looked up. "You're selling? You said you'd never—" "I said no such thing. You said I'd never sell, on my porch, to someone on the phone. What I actually am, Dennis, is a woman who reads the county rezoning notices same as you do, and who called Herb about the corridor valuation 2 weeks before you started sending your wife to photograph my refrigerator." I let that sit. "The East 4 acres go to the corridor project. The money, every dollar of your $2.3 million, dear, funds your children's futures, my care for the rest of my life so that no one, ever, is burdened, and the VA clinic's new wing in your father's name. The house and the maple and my garden stay exactly where they are, with me, until I'm done with them." The dining room was so quiet I could hear the pot roast ticking in the oven. "You had it all planned. Before I even— You were 11 months ahead of me. 26 years of triage, son. The whole job is seeing which way the bleeding will go before it goes there." I softened, because he was still mine, even then, even after everything. "Here is what you never understood, Dennis. You thought the choice was your inheritance sitting in a house or your inheritance sitting in a bank. It was never either. There was no inheritance. There was my life, which I built and paid for and am still using, and there was your children's future, which I was always, always going to protect. You could have been part of the protecting. You chose to be the thing it needed protecting from." My son began to cry at my dinner table, not pretty crying, the other kind, the kind that has 47 years behind it. And Maya, my gray-eyed girl, reached across the table and took her father's hand, not forgiving him. Witnesses aren't forgiveness, but not letting him drown alone at a family table either, because that is what we are in this family when we're being what we're supposed to be. "Dad," she said quietly, "Grandma left one thing out." She looked at me. I nodded. "The trust names a successor trustee. After Herb retires, somebody has to manage everything. The funds, the house, Grandma's care, Tyler's money, all of it." Maya turned back to her father. "She named me 11 months ago, before any of this. Do you understand what that means, Dad? While you were building a file to prove her mind was gone, she was trusting me with everything she has. Her mind was never the one anybody needed to worry about." Brianna had not said one word the entire time. She said none now. She simply took the Willow Gardens brochure out of her handbag. She'd actually brought it. The invitation had been a joke, my God, and placed it face down on the sideboard, like a card she was folding. "Right," I said, and stood up and tied on my apron. "Now we eat. Dennis, carve. Your father's knife is in the second drawer, and your hands are steadier than your judgment." And my son, wet-faced, hollowed out, and for the first time in a year, honest, got up and carved the pot roast in his father's kitchen, while his daughter set the table and his mother watched the maple through the window, standing where it has always stood, going nowhere. I'd like to tell you the year after that dinner was simple. It wasn't. Wounds close from the bottom up, if they close at all, another triage rule, and this one had to close through some hard layers. Dennis went home that night, and by Brianna's own account later, sat in his car in their garage for an hour. The next morning, he called Doc Pearson's office and withdrew everything: the file, the pending referral, the appointment with Judge Halverson's clerk. Herb, who has friends everywhere paper moves, confirmed it by Wednesday. Then, for 2 months, my son didn't call me at all. I let him not call. You can't rush a debridement. It was Maya who told me he'd started seeing a counselor, alone at first, then with Brianna. It was also Maya who told me the part Dennis never has, that the corridor deal money he'd been counting wasn't greed floating free. He'd leveraged his business against a loan 2 years ago, quietly, badly, and the walls had been coming in on him since. That doesn't excuse a single thing he did. My son tried to have his own mother declared incompetent to pay off his own bad bets, and there is no ledger where that balances. But I understood the anatomy of it at last, and understanding matters. Fear does to some people what infection does to a wound. It doesn't create the weakness, it finds it. He came to see me in October, alone. No phone, no brochure, no script. He sat on the porch steps like he used to at 9 years old, and he said, "Mom, I came to tell you what the money was for, not to explain, just so you'd have the truth from me before you heard the rest of it somewhere else." He told me all of it: the loan, the lie to Brianna, who hadn't known the depth of it, the nights doing arithmetic on my acreage like a man selling organs he hadn't been given yet. And then my son said the only sentence from that whole year I've kept. When you recited that phone call back to me, word for word, I realized the person I'd spent months telling doctors was losing her mind was the only one in the family who never lost anything, and I was the one who needed a conservator. I didn't absolve him. I'm his mother, not his priest. But I made him coffee, cream, 1 sugar, and we drank it on the porch. And that was the beginning of the road back, which he is still walking, in fits and starts, mostly forward. The trust bought his debt out that winter. Herb's idea, structured as a loan against Dennis's business with real terms and real interest, approved by the successor trustee, which meant my son had to sit across a table and ask his own 22-year-old daughter for the money, with paperwork, like anyone else. Maya heard him out, asked for his books, took a week, went through every line with a highlighter. Nursing students are terrifyingly thorough, and then approved it with 2 conditions: monthly payments on schedule and Sunday dinners, attendance mandatory. Interest and family, she told him, both compound. I have never been prouder of anything I've grown, and I've won ribbons for my tomatoes. The corridor deal closed in the spring. The east 4 acres went under survey stakes and then under asphalt, and I won't pretend I didn't stand at the fence line one evening and grieve a little for the field where Frank taught Dennis to throw. Land is memory you can walk on. But the maple stayed, the house stayed, the garden stayed. And in September, the VA clinic broke ground on the Frank Calloway wing. They asked me to turn the first shovel. I wore my caduceus pin and my good cardigan, and Maya stood on one side of me in her scrubs, and Dennis stood on the other, holding the shovel steady for me, on camera, in front of everyone, the son of the woman of the hour. Tyler starts college in 6 years,
fully funded, and doesn't know it yet. Maya graduates in 18 months and has already asked to do her clinical rotation in geriatrics. "Somebody's got to look out for the sharp ones," she said. "Everyone assumes they're fine or assumes they're gone. Nobody checks which." Somebody's got to look out for the sharp ones. That's the line, isn't it? That's the whole story if you want it in one line. They came for my house believing sharpness was the one asset a woman my age couldn't possibly still hold. They built a paper trail on that assumption, and it turned out the paper trail that mattered had been filed 11 months earlier by the confused old woman in triplicate with a notary.
Let me finish where these stories are supposed to finish, with what I know now, at 71, that I'd want you to carry out of this kitchen. People ask me if I regret the trap, whether it was cold, letting my son walk 11 months into a wall I'd already built. I've turned that over on many porch evenings, and here is my honest answer. I didn't build a trap. I built a boundary, and Dennis walked at it. A trap wants you to fall. A boundary just refuses to move. The difference is everything, and it's the difference too many kind people never learn. They think love means leaving the gate open while someone measures your house. Love and access are not the same thing. You can love someone with your whole worn-out heart and still lock the drawer. And to those of you my age, and I know you're out there, I read what you write under these stories. Kathy from Oregon, the nurse from Florida, all of you, hear me on this one thing. The moment someone begins narrating your decline, start charting. Write the date. Note who said what in front of whom. Get your own baseline in writing while nobody thinks you're clever enough to do it. Papers signed early are armor. Papers signed late are evidence against you. It is not paranoia. It is triage. You chart before the crisis because during the crisis, nobody believes the patient. And know the difference between the child who visits you and the child who inspects you. One looks at your face, the other looks at your stairs, your refrigerator, your acreage. I pray you never need to know the difference. I suspect some of you already do. To the young ones, the Mayas, you may be the only witness a sharp old person has. When your family starts repeating a story about someone declining, ask yourself who benefits from the story, and then go see for yourself. Sit with them. Do the crossword. Somebody's got to look out for the sharp ones, and the pay is terrible, and it will turn out to be the most important job you ever hold. As for me, I'm still here. The maple turned early this year, red as a medic's cross. Dennis makes his payments and his pot roasts. The counselor is working, slowly, like real things work. Brianna and I will never be close, but she brought her own casserole last Sunday, and it was genuinely good. And at our age, you learn to count that as a treaty. Maya passed her boards, first try, 90-somethingth percentile. It runs in the family. Every evening, I cake my coffee out to the porch, the same porch where I once stood drying dishes and heard my life appraised through an open window. And I sit in Frank's chair, and I look at my garden, and I think about the sentence my son said on that phone call, the one that started everything. She's sitting on $2.5 million and using it to grow tomatoes. He thought that was the tragedy of me. He's since learned it was the entire point of me. The money was never the harvest. The tomatoes were the harvest. The house, the maple, the girl in scrubs who calls just to talk, the son finding his way back one Sunday at a time, that was the estate. It just never appeared on any appraisal. So no, I never did move in on the first. I'm right where Frank left me, and I will be until they carry me out with my boots on and my paperwork in order. And knowing Herb, he's already drafted that too. If you've got a sharp one in your family, go sit with them this week. Do the crossword. Ask them what they see. I promise you they see more than anyone's giving them credit for.
And if you are the sharp one, chart everything, sign early, and plant the tomatoes anyway. If this story sat with you the way a good cup of coffee does, stay close. There are more of us here, the quiet ones with our paperwork in order. And tell me down in the comments, because I read every one of them from this porch, who was the sharp one in your family, and did the rest of them figure it out in time?